next thing I want to talk about real quick is not one of my investigations, but is Spiricom, because I do experiments aside from just investigation. The biggest experiment I've ever done was based on Spiricom. If you've never done research into the Spiricom, I've only got about 3 minutes left. I can't go into it. This is one of the, it's a crime that this isn't a bigger deal in the paranormal. Created in 1979 by George Meek and Bill O'Neill. Going back to the fathers of paranormal, you have Stanley Hergensen, who is known to have recorded the very first EVP in 1957. You have Konstantin Radovay. Those were the two big granddaddies of the paranormal in terms of EVP research. They believed that if you want to communicate with spirits, you use frequencies. You don't use white noise. But nowadays, you're taught it's white noise, not frequencies. It's kind of weird how that was shifted. But his idea, George Meek, this is actually Bill O'Neill operating the Spiricom device, you use 13 tone frequencies. They are within the human range, because this is a radio. This is a two-way radio. You speak into the microphone. You can hear your voice, but the spirit is supposed to manipulate your voice and the energy of your voice, because they believe, kind of like I believe, everything is made up of energy. And the more energy you present for spirits to use, the likelier they are to communicate with you. So they would use all these contraptions, the tone generators right here, and this was the amplifier. This was actually the receivers. And then they had the speaker set up over here, and you could talk to a spirit, almost like talking on the phone. So they also figured out pretty early on, you could maybe communicate with aliens, because you're dealing with frequencies. A lot of people believe that, since it's the same kind of stuff NASA deals with, the possibilities are endless. And then they got to the idea of interdimensional entities, and they kind of went a little crazy with that. But they made contact with a man by the name of Dr. Mueller. Now, this spirit, mind you, these guys, he's from Pennsylvania, George Meek's from around that area. They started talking to this guy named Dr. Mueller. So they're like, okay, cool spirit. He knows a lot. He's actually helping them out. And they started asking him about his life. And it turns out Dr. Mueller, he said he was a scientist, worked for the United States government. So they started doing some research. It turns out there was a Dr. Mueller that worked in the 60s with the United States Department of Defense. And in his off time, he worked with radios. He worked with music. And they actually tracked down his widow and sent her recordings of the Spiricom. And she verified that is her late husband's voice. And he died in 1969, if I remember right. So about 10 years before their experiments took off. Now, they were asked to come to Washington, D.C. to present for the United States government. They were that popular. They saw the potential, almost like Don Molnar was talking about Project Stargate using ESP. They were wondering, could we talk to spirits and they would give us information about, the Russians at the time, or the Chinese. So, allegedly, the demonstration went really well, to the point where they almost bought the Spiricom off of them to use as an actual government project. And then, as fate would have it, this gotcha journalist wrote an article, because Bill O'Neill, years and years ago, he was in a mental institution. But he was, cleared of any insanity, anything like that. He actually ended up having a successful kids show where he did little sketches. But because of that article, the United States government pulled out its funding. And they had a newsletter they would send around the world, and people stopped subscribing to it. Bill O'Neill ended up becoming very depressed because of this. He ended up becoming a bit of a recluse. George Meek, he ended up passing away. He was an older man, and they ended up giving the Spiricom one of the Mark IVs, the very last one they made in '85, to this girl named Sarah Estep. And she used it with great success until her passing. And believe it or not, the Spiricom Mark IV, which is the last Spiricom we have intact, is in an aviation museum in Florida, sitting in the gift shop, which is a very strange place for this to end up, but that's the only one we have. So when I did my experiments, it's very easy to find schematics for this. All the frequencies they use, I created what I call the 5Com. Now the reason I call it that is because it's not exactly a Spiricom, but it's close enough. It still uses the frequencies. I have had no success with the spirits over the radio, but because the frequencies generate energy, I have had, more spirit box responses when I had the frequencies running than when the frequencies weren't running.